I mean, there was some reporting on this, but just to make it absolutely clear that Hegseth, right, on his bicep has this motto tattooed on there that is Deus Vult, right? It is God wills it. Now, for all of you who may have, zoned out during your high school medieval um, you know, history
Who would ever
lessons,
do that?
right?
Come on.
This is the kind of thing that was shouted by the first Crusaders, right? The kind of conquest against Muslims, right? And he himself has been kind of witnesses say he was like shouting at a bar, right? Kill all the Muslims. And he's been known to saying all kinds of Islamophobic statements, but that statement has today been known to be among the far Christian right, who are really for a militant Christian state, right? And again, this is you know a very top law enforcement officer we're talking about, like getting installed by the Trump administration with that, like believes it so much it's like tattooed on his body, right? And on a bicep, which is the kind of power move, right? That's right.
I
Yeah, there
heard
was actually supposedly there's reports in scattered historical documents of the Crusaders actually yelling that as they went into Jerusalem and started just slaughtering people. And then those
Yeah.
same accounts later on, it talks about how the blood of the infidels was up to their ankles as they waded to the temple to celebrate the holy mass of Jesus. And it was like, oh, that stuff was brutal to read when training in our training as a church historian. You'd read that, and I'd have students read that sometimes, and they were utterly shocked. But that was the cry as they started hacking their enemies to death.
the hair pulling. One of the hair pulling aspects of all of this is people don't realize the depth of ideology that tattoo represents. I heard some very prominent political podcasters who aren't particularly religious say, "Don't focus on the tattoo. That's a distraction. People will look at that and say how silly the left is being." No, what we're doing is we're looking at the signs and symbols and the breadcrumbs that they put out there, and we're understanding the import and the implication of it. Pete Hegseth is coming from this neo-reformed far right. I ran into these dudes
Yeah.
back in years ago, more than a decade ago, when I was in a conservative Presbyterian denomination that was reformed. And I didn't know folks like this existed. Neo-Confederates, kinists, people with the most vile racial beliefs, but also gender beliefs, political beliefs. And now Hegseth is deep into that stuff. I mean, he's not tangential to these circles. And it is extremely hard edge, violent, machismo, patriarchal stuff. And it is still so hard to get the general population, A, to pay attention at all. The role ignorance played in the 2024 presidential election is not to be overstated. And then two, to understand the religious dimensions of it, which it's still infuriating that we don't have, and I'm not bashing journalists at all. They're going to be an incredibly important, they're going to have an incredibly important role going into this next administration. But y'all, for please, like we've got to understand the Christian nationalism here, the white Christian nationalism here, the import. And I got more to say on these darn cabinet picks. So Pete Hegseth, I think, is the most egregious. Maybe not. I don't know. It's hard to say. Here's the latest that came out. A whistleblower report obtained by the New Yorker alleged that during his time leading a nonprofit advocacy group, Hegseth was repeatedly intoxicated at work events and gatherings with staff. It also alleges that he sexually pursued female staffers and that the organization ignored another staffer's alleged sexual misconduct. So he got booted. Hegseth got booted from not one, but two different veterans advocacy organizations amid these allegations of mismanagement and personal misconduct. Now we want to approve this guy to be in charge of all of the military in the world's most powerful military. And the biggest critique folks have leveled against him is he's got no experience running a large organization at all. And the experience he does have with any organizations, he was booted out. So what are we doing here? He's not even the only one. Trump just talked about Kash Patel, wanting him in charge of the FBI, which, by the way, would necessitate the firing of Chris Wray, who he appointed in 2017 for a 10-year term. So 3 years before that term ends, he would have to fire him, put in this guy, Kash Patel, who went on a podcast and said this outlandish thing. He said on day one, he would kick out all the staff in the FBI headquarters, make FBI headquarters building a museum to the deep state, whatever that means, and then send out all the 7,000 employees to go catch criminals. That's his big plan. And we can talk even more. His pick for the Federal Communications Commission. This is flying under the radar to a dangerous extent. This guy's as far right as you get to be in charge of the FCC. He voted against net neutrality. He sent out a memo to the heads of Meta, Google, you name it, all these tech communications companies, and said, it's about to change. And you are not going to be able to, what did he call them? The censorship cartel. By censorship, he's probably referring to the fact that these organizations, particularly in 2020, were trying to throttle the misinformation machine. And so they were flagging certain posts as untrue or dubious, or they were suppressing hate speech, like literal racist, sexist hate speech. And that's what he wants to dismantle. So, folks, what are we doing here? And the only fire break that we have is the Senate approval process, which is by no means guarantees that these folks won't go through. So I'm very, very, very concerned.